have a great relationship with Canada, maybe as good or better, hopefully, than ever before.
It's a tremendous pleasure to be here in Washington. Merci beaucoup.
Well, they look pretty pleased with how things went. Should they be? Andrew and Chantal gave up their Monday night to tell us what they think. Andrew's here in Toronto, Chantal's in Montreal. So what's your general sense? How did they do, Andrew?
Well, look, they don't hold these things unless they've got some reasonable assurance of success at the best of times or in any of these conferences. I imagine there was even more negotiations and discussions that went into this one, and there may be a story in some of those early negotiations, but by the time they got the leaders together, it was pretty assured of some degree of success. Trudeau's personal performance, he'd nailed down this formula some time ago of, just simply stressing how Canada does things without being overtly critical of the United States. I think the wild card was more in Trump's performance. Nobody can really predict from one day to the next how he's going to perform, but I think with all of the chaos that's been enveloping the White House of lately, he was probably under strict orders to stick to the script, and he did for the most part.
He probably enjoyed 3 hours without the chaos obvious in front of him. Chantal, what was your take?
Just about the same. Trudeau was there on a good Trump day, a quiet day, and I think they were grateful for that. I think the Canadians achieved all of their objectives. It may be that the bar is low. What is called success today is having an American president state something that we've been taking for granted for 30 years. And that's the definition of success. But still, given the hurdles, given all of the other things that have been happening in Washington, it went well. It was well planned. Trudeau played his role properly, and I can't see that it could have gone any better.
There's a lot of people trying to determine what the meaning of tweak is tonight. What should we take from the use of that word? Should we assume that it's just minor tinkering, or was that kind of an out? Andrew? Okay. Sorry.
When you sit down to negotiate trade, a lot of interest groups, industries show up. So whatever you think is tweaking today might be more significant or insignificant once you're at the table. I don't think even Donald Trump knows what the definition of tweak really is.
And it's not just on trade. Look, this is day one of the relationship between them. Not only do we not know what's happening on trade, that's to be determined, but on a whole range of issues. It's one thing, it's fine to say, the Prime Minister doesn't necessarily need to get in the President's face, at a joint press conference on the travel ban and the implications for Canada in that regard. But our interests as well as our values are engaged there, and they're going to need to be a steady pressure put from this day forward on that issue. So yeah, we had a good day today where they got along fine, nobody threw anything, but this is only the beginning.
There was one moment that I found interesting when Justin Trudeau quoted Churchill about the Canada-U.S. relationship, and that played two ways. One, it played to Trump's apparent affection for Churchill. He's brought the bust of Churchill back into the Oval Office. But what was actually said was interesting. Some people were reading into it. Let's just watch the clip here to remind ourselves of it.
Winston Churchill once said, "That long Canadian frontier from the Atlantic to the Pacific Oceans, guarded only by neighborly respect and honorable obligations, is an example to every country and a pattern for the future of the world." That, my friends, is the very essence of the Canada-U.S. relationship.
So was he trying to signal something there in the use of that quote, Andrew?
Probably. I mean, politicians speak in platitudes all the time. But what's interesting always is what's the choice of platitudes, which ones do they use and which ones did they leave out? So there's an example there. I think this probably is worth reading something into it. I thought it was interesting that Trudeau, for example, mentioned the 1991 Acid Rain Accord, and I may have missed it, but I don't think that found its way into Trump's speaking notes. I thought it was also interesting Trudeau making a point of saying, I'm not going to come down here and lecture the president. That implies that there was something that he needed to be lectured about. So it was a subtle way of demurring from criticism and yet also offering some.
Chantal?
Yes, except at some point speaking in code just won't cut it, and we may look back on today as the high point of the relationship depending on where the Trump administration goes from here. I don't think that Donald Trump would have taken that Churchill quote to mean anything that doesn't fit his worldview, i.e. good frontier Canada, bad frontier Mexico.
Yeah, it was funny. I was watching his face, Trump's face, during the quote, and there was one point where he smiled, I think more in affection for the fact that it was Churchill that was speaking as opposed to listening particularly to the quote. Let me throw something else at you. One thing that neither side mentioned today, at least not directly, were the words climate change. And we were used to, with Trudeau and Obama, and Trudeau in other meetings with other world leaders, including the three amigos, climate change was always a big thing on the agenda. It was always in all the statements. Nothing here today. What does that tell us?
That they're going to be pushing that agenda with state governments rather than with the White House, that they feel it's not worth spending political capital on it at this stage, especially at the first meeting, because it's like throwing change up in the air. Basically, that's where I think it is.
Yeah, I mean, they looked for the overlap. If you look at that long communique that the White House issued, which could have been written by the Prime Minister's office and may well have been, it was all the things where there's an overlap. Obviously, we have broad agreement that we'd like to have some degree of free trade. We'll hope that it's as full as we have now. And we have agreement that we want to, have security, depending on what the meanings of that is. So they look for the overlap, and they're not going to focus on things in which they clearly disagree.
The Prime Minister's back in the House of Commons tomorrow. The opposition, one assumes, is going to be standing there with some questions about this trip. Is he vulnerable on anything to them tomorrow?
I don't think really, except more to his left than to his right. I think the NDP will be trying to say, I imagine will be saying that you should have been more overt, more critical on particularly on the immigration front. And I would agree with that in the long run. I want to see them pressing that case, even including in public. I just don't think he necessarily had to do it today. But I would imagine that will be one of the points that the NDP will be hitting.
Jean-Tel, last word.
I agree with Andrew. I also don't think they're going to pursue that particular visit as something that they can attack on for very long. The rest of the relationship will probably provide more material.
All right. Good of both of you to come out tonight. Jean-Tel facing cold weather and a bit of snow in Montreal. Andrew here in Toronto.